in a way, I think it's many of these things will not be in the text, the good part. It's a kind of a lived experience. It's a discussion we're having now that is the valuable part. The insights come from you working or dancing with the ideas, not from the text itself. So it's really hard to do the right, to play the right chords with text to get people into the right mind, especially with things. Interfaces they are gestural, they are embodied. It's really hard to describe them in text and do them justice. Of course you can, but it takes so much time unless you're a really good author. So for me, I rather show 3 more prototypes or 10 more prototypes for the same time than write a single text.
Right. Well, that is a big problem because last meeting we had, well, the special session, we had lightning talks. And the lightning talks are relatively easy to find in a transcript, clean up a bit, and then we leave the rest for dialogue. Because, I've been trying to highlight the power of text now for over a decade. And I'm really, really tired when I hear things like, well, the text is crap, which is what you just said. I agree with you that the interfaces need to be live. Something we could definitely do is if we do like a lightning talk or, Adam presents, we put in a special section, and then we put a link to that moment of video so people can see you presenting it. Nothing wrong with that. But it's just having these free floating things. Who has time to watch an entire day worth of us chatting? Hardly anyone will have that time, right? It needs to be on YouTube. It needs to be referable. Absolutely. So how can we manage to find not a counterpoint, but not a middle point, but something to elevate this so that this experience is accessible? Yes, Andrea.
What I've seen some YouTubers do, people who, well, I don't know, YouTubers, podcasters, they have the 2-hour long podcast discussion as a 2-hour long video, but then they extract like 5, maximum 7 minutes clip out of that with a separate heading. So and I find that very successful. Like, I love it when, if I do a podcast, someone does it and just takes out, because this is like, basically I'll just talk for 2 hours, but then when the person picks the 2 best things they think I said and just cuts the 5-minute clip of that and makes that a single video, independent video, I find a lot of value in that, because like, first, it's not what I think was interesting, it was what someone else thought was the best thing I said. And then people usually tend to find those 5-minute clips and not feel intimidated by the 2-hour mark. They know that those 5 minutes are some of the best cherry-picked moments. And then if they're so taken with it, of course, there's the link in the description to the 2-hour thing. So knock yourself out with that. I find that quite nice.
I think that sounds fine. I just have 2 concerns about it. Number one, it is of course a lot of work to go through. Well, okay, maybe not a 2-hour session; it's too long. But like today, the whole day, that'll be a lot of time going through to edit. So there is significant effort to make that happen. Plus, you get the editorializing that the people contributing may not agree with, but it also avoids the side of this that is text. I don't think it is that useful to have a forum that is ostensibly about text, even though we very happily go into very other areas, and ignore the text side of things. How can we produce a readable phrases? I mean, for instance, with Adam here, if he would just, for instance, write, I find so-and-so interesting, the shape of it. I find this thing that it is now not so interesting. Just a few things. Because, Adam is an incredibly different person to me. So for me to write that on his behalf, I don't think is right. That's why for the rolling journal we have, I have the first and last sentence of every article, and then I have AI generated bullet points. So I think AI summaries will help us at some point to an extent. But do you feel that maybe, and this is not...
So I will stop you, and I'll have to go in a minute, but I'm just going to sell a bit. The thing is, I definitely think quite a few things mentioned here are a good basis for prototypes. Again, we see, as we discussed initially, some of the limitation of not just our own cognition, but the resource we can pour in, being money into a transcription, storage, all this, and the value we get out of it. So I think there might be something there for building, or at least attempting, or designing and trying. Either today, that might be a bit short notice, or if we're following up on if we do believe that was valuable.
I think maybe we can have some kind of good practices guidelines, which is write a summary of what you did, but maybe that can stay optional. Because I completely agree with everything you said, Fred, but I would experience that as just like a lot of added pressure if I have to find the time after each of these sessions to also write stuff down. So I think that makes my participation a bit more selfish in that case. It's like, I'm getting what I'm getting out of this dialogue, and I'm happy to, share that. So it makes the point of this more selfish for us as a group. But I would like the option to just go with that, as opposed to putting the extra effort on Monday, on a Saturday morning, to put it in text so that it's also useful for perhaps other people.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I see your hand there, Mark, but just on that point, the thing where we had the special session where we had these lightning talks really did help, because that means that there is one person for talking for an acknowledged period of time, and there are questions and answers after that. So that means that I could spend a little more time cleaning up that section, do a summary of it, and then this short back and forth is not as big a deal. So maybe instead of writing a thing, we say beforehand, either before the day, I have something to present, or even during the thing, we say, I would like to present so-and-so, can I do that now? Because the problem is more the interleaving when it becomes very discussy in terms of the transcript.
How about this? How about we make it a habit so that at the end of every demo day, session, talk, whatever, we do a quick round and everyone says a 3-sentence summary about what they just did. I think it's easier to do it at the end rather than in the beginning. So at the end of this demo day, Adam says 3 sentences about his project, and that will be what you take and make the transcript out of and put it in the description.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. We should absolutely do that. I also think that, I mean, so earlier when I presented today, and I was ready for some questions, it was then decided that we're going to have other presentations and discuss it afterwards, which didn't then happen. There hasn't been any comments. The problem with that in the transcript would be, here's my long block of going on and on and on, and here are some comments further down. So maybe we should try to do Frode's big chat. Adam says, blah, blah says, and then another one. Very often we will go into back and forth, and live, that can be really worthwhile, but as a transcript, it's horrible. So I see some nodding here. So if we agree that at the end of every 2-hour session, we have 10 minutes, at least, whatever, of people saying what they want to have written down, right? So that will be nicely transcribed. It'll be put at the front of the article, and it will be clear. And also, I do need you guys to have a look at the PDFs when I send them to you. Not to do copy editing or anything like that, but if you feel you are, just by skimming, represented wrong, I can fix that. If you want something added, I can fix that. But, mostly sending these out and there's absolutely nothing back. That's a challenge. Matthias is impeccable timing now that we're breaking for lunch. Mark, while Matthias is connecting, what did you want to say?
It was just to make the point I put in the sidebar that to a certain extent, writing stuff down, well, if you haven't got time to find stuff, you maybe don't have time to read. I think one of the problems I find is too much is hidden in social media. I just don't have the time or the interest to go and look in social media that I don't use. It's a solecism of today that just because I use a particular social media, anyone else is going to. And I don't think we can afford to do that. I don't mean that, and I don't in saying that mean that at all unkindly. I think it's absolutely sensible that if I'm used to using a particular channel as my first expression, that's absolutely fine. I think the thing that we need to be mindful of is how that is migrated to be put in front of a wider audience. And it doesn't necessarily need to have a lot written about it. It's just the fact that, even if it's just taking a movie that was only available on a Twitter page for sake of argument and just putting it somewhere more easily findable.
But Mark, we do that. We only use YouTube. YouTube is completely open for anyone.
No, I accept that. But I mean, I know that some of the stuff that we use and talk about here does get, nonetheless, sort of ends up going away into something. And the further I have to start logging into I normally just give up. I just haven't got the time or the interest to go fishing around in social media.
The only thing that has been used for these discussions is Twitter and YouTube.
Yeah, well, I mean, since Mr. Musk took over, I haven't used Twitter, so I wouldn't know what's happening on it. I'm just not interested. But I'm being plain spoken about it, simply because if I want to be seen. If I want to say something, I need to understand it needs to go somewhere. I'm not saying that what the Future of Text sort of site, and the lab has put forward, but some of the stuff that collectively within the group we've been doing has happened outside that. And I want to stress the fact, I'm not saying that's wrong. I think the challenge is basically just getting the pointers. It actually wants to be moved from where it's hidden in a
Mark,
silo.
It's hard. It's all the videos on YouTube, entirely open. And then the transcripts are on our website. Nothing is put on, nothing is really put on Twitter, only a few discussion points. There's nothing on Instagram, nothing on any of the other ones. It really...
Well, I know, but okay, fine. But I know along the way that when we have these discussions, people will point to stuff that they put on something. And I say, it's fine, but as long as we're bringing it in, and certainly that's something that has been done. But I'm making the point as a sort of, as a design point, as a point of principle to do that. Again, it's not to disadvantage anyone to record their thoughts in a manner that they find sensible and where they find it sensible. Part of our job in this forum as a whole, in the way that we memorialize it, is to extract it from the hidden silos of social media and put it into more accessible things, which broadly we do. So I'm not arguing with you, Fred, but I am making the point for the record.
Okay. Anyway, Matthias, sorry about the timing. You joined us just before lunch. We will be back in an hour in the same room. I'll leave the room running. So any final before we...
Yeah, just quick note. I absolutely have to get into a project call with my team from 2:30 to 4. So I'll be back here at 1 and I can do my demo maybe in half an hour and then I'll be back at 4.
Okay, yeah, so Adam, you'll have to read the transcript and watch the video. I saw your comment too. Okay, see most of you at 1. Right, take care. So everybody had some sort of a lunch break, and we've been talking a little bit on and off about how to conduct yourself as a community. And Andrea was intelligently suggesting we need a bit more of a presence. So based on what we talked about right before our break, how about we take the 10-minute summary of everybody in our meeting and take that as a separate unit on social media. If we do that, if we do that continuously, it may help build up that presence. Any other comments on that before we go on over to Andrea?
All right, so let me read a paragraph. So just to reiterate for Matthias and Mark, my research question for today was this: can I take a paragraph from Moby Dick and reconstruct certain aspects of my understanding of that paragraph, or my process understanding that paragraph in virtual reality? So I want to start by reading the paragraph, and then I'll then the plan was to show you the VR that I worked on in the first session of today's demo day. Yeah.
Should we put on headsets?
No, not yet, not now. You don't have I didn't send you the link yet.
Okay, fine. I'll do
Yeah.
that for later. Yeah.
So I started reconstructing the paragraph and going through all of these like things in my head. And then I decided just now that I'm not going to show you what I did, because it's just going to look to you like some kind of virtual architecture, abstract sculpture thing, which is kind of interesting, but not really relevant for what I care about. And I realized that what's most important is the action part of it, so it's not like here it is abstract work of art representing Moby Dick. It's the actual me taking action on those objects. So I'm actually going to start with an empty scene and kind of do it again while I'm talking to you about what I'm doing. Okay, so let me just read a paragraph. This is a paragraph. This is the first time I'm reading it out loud, so I should have read this a little bit before to practice. But okay, here it goes. Though many of the whales, as has been said, were in violent motion, yet it is to be observed that as a whole, the herd neither advanced nor retreated, but collectively remained in one place. As is customary in those cases, the boats at once separated, each making for some one lone whale on the outskirts of the shoal. In about 3 minutes' time, Kikeg's harpoon was flung. The stricken fish darted blinding spray in our faces and then running away with us like light, steering straight for the heart of the herd. Though such a movement on the part of the whale struck under such circumstances is in no wise unprecedented, and indeed is almost always more or less anticipated, yet does it present one of the perilous vicissitudes of the fishery. As for the swift monster, the swift monster drags you deeper and deeper into the frantic shoal, you bid adieu to circumspect life and only exist in a delirious throb. All right, so it is like it's a really action-packed scene. The whales are moving frantically, and yet as a whole, they look static. And Kikeg throws a harpoon at them, and then from that moment on, there's this madness that spirals out. And for me, the most kind of the central point of the paragraph is the last line where it says, you bid adieu to circumspect life and only exist in a delirious throb. So let me just go right in. You'll see as I'm kind of building this is very much my process when I design architecture. I hone in on a feeling of a space, and it can be a dynamic space. It can be any kind of space as the center part of inspiration. And then I start to design around it so that it encapsulates that space. And what the design is kind of irrelevant as long as I feel connected in my action to that. So I'll try to, and again, the final thing is what it is. But what I found most important is my actual creative act to recreate the scene. And the target is always going to be in my head, some sort of experience of this last few words, the only exist in a delirious throb. All right. So let me screen share. Okay. This, by the way, is a mountainous landscape that is from one of our architecture NVR project right now. This is a LiDAR scan from Puerto Rico, but I cannot show you the actual building. But I thought it would be nice to just use this environment. All right, I'm gonna go into play mode. Oh, no, this is the scene view. 1 second. I need to share the game view. Hold on.
It's funny talking about Moby Dick and you holding a headset like that. It looks like you're a sailor going out to sea.
I am about to go to sea.
Cybernaut.
All right. Do you see the active view? Yes. Okay. And you can hear me, right? All right. I should have reset my play area, but I didn't. Okay, let me quickly get the extension cable for my audio. I'm kind of tied in with I'm tied in with my audio cable and my link cable, but so is VRDZ still. Okay. I'm gonna go into fly mode. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to do was to get myself some whales. So the most important thing seemed to have been just like the shoal of whales. So I kind of felt that there was so many of them, but they were kind of describing this field. So they were each moving, but together it looked like they were kind of forming a uniform block. So I'm gonna go up and I want a few more. This is my whale cube. So I'm just gonna get myself a few more whales. And I really feel strongly like I want to go on the vertical as opposed to horizontal. I don't know why, like for me, it feels like this whole action is happening like in a vortex, like I'm inside of a tornado rather than happening like in a circle. I think the reality was that they were probably more circular with the sailor boats kind of surrounding them. So right now it just looks a bit like a little bit chaotic, like I'm surrounded by these circles. But in our tool, we have the possibility to do this. So what I've activated here is a scale model of what I just did. So I'm surrounded. This is like what's super specific about our in-house tool is that you're able to see things at 1-to-1, but then you can activate this thing, and this is actually a doubling of the entire scene. So you can get the subjective perspective of things, but you can also get it like the God's view, right? The aerial of everything. And when I first did this earlier today, I realized that you can kind of make out the circles. So you can see how I was in the middle, and then I kind of, did a radius with my hand. So you see how there are 3 bubbles in here. And I love how this is already an architectural structure, but you can feel the human size that created these 3 spheres. So even this process, while I'm looking at the experience of it, and then I'm looking at this thing here, I'm always like kind of connected to, okay, the sense of chaos is there, but then there's also a sense of overall organization, which it wasn't so clear from here. There's no organization here. Here it looks chaotic. It's just some random stuff. But here it looks organized. So this feels to fit a little bit the description of the whales coming together into a school of fish kind of thing. All right, so I'm going to, I'm going to close this for now. And then I don't like that they're white, so I'm gonna paint them some color. And like I'm an architect, so I like to make things stone, although they're moving. Like for me, the fact that their material. Oh, so this kind of marble. I kind of like this. I kind of like the marble, floating marble stuff. All right, so now I'm just gonna shoot them. So this is also kind of, I mean, it's just a tool, but in my head, I'm trying to replay even with a tool the action of the paragraph. So normally I don't shoot stuff like these are just some, we call them material balls. So we paint things by shooting material balls. I normally don't shoot things so fast, but in this case, I'm kind of enjoying is that like the rhythm of like just shoot. So I'm just painting them different colors. I should go down here and paint this as well. Fish, more fish. I wish these were kind of bigger so I can throw harpoons at them. And I also wonder what I would feel like if I made them like red. I just need some like crazy color. Maybe this one. This is okay. So let's try. This is more violent. This is kind of more violent. I don't know, as if, but I feel like the moment hasn't really gotten there. Okay, I just undid that. I feel like that was too violent for right now because we haven't really shot any of them. But I might go and continue to make some of them marble. Maybe I have a darker marble. Where's my dark marble? Dude, I think this is granite. Oh. Maybe some fish are darker. Maybe they have some kind of hierarchy, so I'm gonna make this dark. Oh, I'm not really hitting them. All right, sorry. All right, so then the harpoon shoots and everything kind of fades out, and it feels to me that there's this like kind of trajectories through this. So how are we gonna establish some kind of like trajectories? Where everything, I'm getting pulled in there. I'm getting pulled through this thing to the point where losing touch with other stuff. Oh, sorry, this is my alarm clock. Yeah, this is my alarm clock for the meeting. Let me go 1 more minute and then I'll have to stop, but we can save this and do this later. So, we have some showers. Okay, we have some parametricized stuff in here that allows us to kind of easily add. These are architectural elements, but I'm actually gonna use them in this case for something completely different. So I'm gonna paint this water. Come on, go water. I'm gonna paint this water. Kind of stretch it a little bit. Move it around. I'm basically gonna create some tunnels that I'm gonna fly through in the middle of this thing. Let's try the experience. I have not. So it needs to feel drastic, and it needs to feel. It needs to. I like this pointy stuff. It needs to block and this. It needs to disorient me. That's kind of how I read that. It's kind of like I'm being pulled in a certain direction, but it's also kind of disorienting. So we still need to work on the experience in there, but if I check out how the whole thing looks, I'm also able to make changes in here to adjust my experience. So if I activate this, I'm actually able to move individual things. So you see, I've grabbed the piece, and do you see the one it's moving up there 1-to-1? I'm still working on improving some of this stuff, but basically, I'm able to make decisions in here and feel how in my head right now what I'm doing is some of the whales are starting to disperse as I have introduced this commotion inside. So my trajectory is starting to spread them out. So somehow I feel like doing this at this scale as opposed to the bigger scale because I'm a bit faster grabbing things like this. So some of the whales and the fish, I guess it's just a lot of whales, are starting to disperse and break away from this. And I'm gonna do it in here first. And then I can also check, see that thing is still I left over there. I can also kind of start to check and imagine the experience of these things starting to depart from the main school or shoal, as I have introduced this kind of weird disturbance pushing through them. What are these whales here doing? These whales still need to move away, but I'm not that fast moving them away. But these whales we're gonna just have to disperse. Maybe some are running even faster away. Maybe the ones that have run away are just another color. Maybe there's one that I've hit. Maybe this is like blood starting to be in the water. So if this is water, maybe some are just hurt. So I can.
It's just very impressive, Andrea.
All right, I have to stop and run at my meeting. Let me save.
When will you be back?
I'll be back at 4.
Okay, so that's 3 UK. Okay.
Give me 1 second because I need to save before I close. Exit play mode. Paste my work. All right. Stop sharing. Okay, so that was a really quick, 10-minute, 50-minute live design thinking VR process. But yeah, that's basically what I do with architecture, but also with things that are not architecture. I guess that's kind of the big idea for me, that I'm taking my architecture process, and I think it works equally well for non-architecture stuff. The process itself is spatializing thought and emotion. All right, I would love to hear your thoughts, but I'm 3 minutes late, so I have to exit right now and enter my other call, but I'll see you at 4.
See you in an hour and a half. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I think it's a shame that you have to run now when our ideas are fresh. So I suggest, especially because it's not so long and it's new, that if she's fine with that, does another run later. And if she doesn't, then maybe we could just put the last 30 seconds back when she's there so that we have it fresh. Because I imagine all of us had plenty of ideas or suggestions or criticism or whatever to bounce off her.
Now we can say what we really think about it.
Yes.
That was, of course, very impressive. And the thing when, she came outside and she looked up and she had the water glass type thing inside, it reminded me a little bit of some kind of modern architecture, But the key is obviously being there rather than seeing a pencil drawing is so different. So I'm wondering how this then helps us think of being there with stuff that isn't a building, that isn't architectural in the physical sense. So it's going to be really, really interesting to have collaborations going into that kind of VR realm that is real and not just theoretical for information stuff. And it's not just going to be colors, it's not just going to be spaces, it's going to be amazing stuff. What do you think? I mean, one of the issues that we have is twofold. One is, I wanted to be there in the room with her, for us to, so that's one thing. And the other thing is this AI stuff now with generative art. You can now have generative AI to do 360 images. So you can go in. So it's going to be a lot of opportunities, but a lot of that means I think it's going to be harder to have shared environments somehow. Adobe Firefly, Midjourney, all these things doing incredible things. But in order to go from that made environment into somewhere else, we have to have intermediaries. I think that's going to be a challenge. Yeah, Fabian.
So in the spirit also of the demo day, I'm going to try to briefly share my screen, because something that also might be interesting for her. Let me know when you see it. Can you see the screen? Because I can't see you.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's an Eiffel Tower, according to the prompt I asked. It was generated on my own little desktop at home. I mean, little, still a gamer or 3D professional desktop, but it was not done in the cloud on a big infrastructure. And the point is, it was made with this, it's called Shape E, I think.
Oh, Fabian, can I insert something really appropriate about this?
Yeah.
Okay, you've been bugging us about putting our large language models on our own systems. I submitted Liquid again to Apple yesterday, and as you all know, there is a you can put in your OpenAI key and it'll interact with that. Apple disallowed it because you would have to pay for the key. So in Liquid, I'm not allowed to have something that is paid for externally, nor am I allowed to specify where they can get the key externally. It's completely obscene and stupid, and it really highlights why we need to do exactly what you're talking about.
I mean, there is money involved. They have a Play Store or an App Store, actually. They're going to say it's about security so that you don't steal whatever the data or usage from your customers or users. But yeah, in practice, they take a 30% cut. So they're doing everything they can to lock down the delivery mechanisms. So yeah, I think for this kind of problems also, and especially when we want to try things, it is important to consider. And obviously, for the thing I also annoy you, as you say quite often, it's the privacy reason. I don't necessarily want anybody else to know about the weird idea I have. Like if I want to design well on the spot for this, or fish or harpoon or whatnot, I can rely on a library, external library, or I can just do this locally. So the example I showed you, you had to trust me that it was the Eiffel Tower or like one interpretation of it. But there are a couple of other models like this. And to give you an order of magnitude, the Eiffel Tower there, or those models on my computer, which is, again, it's not a data center, it's just one single computer, takes about 25 seconds. So it's not instantaneous, but it's not like 10 minutes or something. And I'm showing this now, again, in the spirit of demo day, because she showed us some symbolic fishes and whales and whatnot. And it might actually be better. I mean, it depends on the context. But I'm just trying to showcase here that if we want also something more direct, like a 3D representation of an idea or an object, it is feasible today to have that. And again, on something either local or something that doesn't cost like millions or billions of euros. In a lot of cases, having an artist do it themselves is going to give a much better job. But it's tricky to ask an artist to do something in 20 seconds and have something usable. So I think in some cases, especially as she did there, which is on the spot, and potentially, well, not this time, but we can imagine where we are part of the conversation. So she gets some of our feedback, when we are there with her and co-create. I think these kind of assets, that can be quite powerful to integrate in the flow, in the process itself.
Questions? Well, first of all, just a brief observation. It's probably going to be relatively similar to the desktop publishing revolution, where everybody uses horrible fonts with the AI generated images. It's going to be absolutely awful for a while, and it'll stabilize into something else. But to do a summary of text with these LLMs, can they do bigger tokens, or can it easily be scripted? I want to do our books rather than have to send up chunks. So you're nodding, that's great. Second one is, how long does it take to generate a summary of a long document?
I mean, it depends how long, but basically one way to cheat a bit the system is you chunk it. So you don't do the whole book, you do paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter, and then you do the summary of those summaries. So it's going to be a lot of different calls. Let's say instead of calling one for the whole book, you called it, I don't know, 1,000 times. But as long as it's scripted, you don't really care. So yeah, I think there will always work in order to make the number of tokens grow bigger. It's not necessarily necessary though. In a lot of time, in a lot of context, especially I would argue summarization, it's not necessarily that problematic.
Because we have, with our own work, we have so many issues. Number one is, should we publish a monthly journal, quarterly journal? Should it be per thing we do? Should it be only per year? What we talked about many times, the binding of it. And then separately, how are people going to be able to access it? We have this rolling journal experiment now, which is quite useful, except you can't really do keyword searches in it because it doesn't have all the original text. So with these kinds of opportunities that you're discussing now, Fabian, I'm wondering, I don't even mind having a web front end for this, as long as the documents exist in a stable form somewhere. We should be able to do that. And looking at the environment that both you and Andrea have built, there's absolutely no reason why the primary interaction should be a PDF. Of course not. But it's good to have the text in a thing and then use these methods to get it out. Your example of saying all of those primitives could have been actual whales, absolutely agree with you. And in the sense that it could be better or not, you said both, depending on the use case. All of that is going to become trivially easy for some use cases soon, because some people will make money to make the software happen. So how can we make our record more accessible? When I showed some of this stuff to my advisors earlier this week, they immediately started saying, keyword search is so old-fashioned, why don't you do this, that, and the other? And they used a lot of acronyms. And they are right, but all I was trying to do with the basic reader library is to, in a basic database, have all the data there. And just like Mark Anderson and Adam Wern did, then we can start doing things with it.
It's interesting you say that, they started using all these acronyms, because basically they were just saying the same thing with a different thing of letters. I mean, it's something really interesting I'm seeing in this, research group I've joined, is there's so much magical thinking that is basically a bunch of them sitting around saying, well, I should be able to do this, should being the operative word. And when you actually ask them, what actionable thing this is going to sit upon, it's you can see in their mind's eye as an empty Google search box. And that's about the level of intellectual understanding that they apply to it. And it's not laziness or stupidity. It's just, it's the presumption that this is just something that should exist. Therefore, if I imagine it hard enough, somebody else will go and make it. Yes.
Do you remember this thing? You may very well have been presented it in your introduction to our PhD thing, but stop me if you've all seen this, but if you represent knowledge as a dot, everything you know about a subject in the dot, the rest of the entire world is outside. The bigger the dot gets, the bigger the circumference gets. So that means that the more you know, this is a graphical illustration of the more you know you don't know, because you understand that better. So I think you're dealing with a lot of people who are in this space, this, and you are this. You're saying all of these unknowns, how do they fit with this little thing? They just haven't traveled far enough. And
it's always difficult to sort of make the observation without one appearing to be judgmental, and that's not the point of saying it. It's a sort of, it's trying to get people to be a bit more imaginative, and also a bit more honest about what needs doing, because otherwise you end up building the wrong tooling, and you invariably you end up with people who build a sort of something that would be better described as a prototype, except it's not presented as such. If someone said this is a prototype, you'd say yes, exactly, and you'd interact with it.
But it gets
doing the sort of thing indeed that Fabian does. But what actually happens is someone said, look, we've answered the problem, and all you see is a set of half-broken things.
But this is a really, really key design problem for us, because it's easy illustrated about learning a language. Learning a different language, there's so much you don't know about the grammar and vocabulary. Of course not. But it also comes to learning a lot of more common sense things. Right? Like yesterday in my horrendous meeting, they didn't accept that I may have looked at this a little bit deeper, and they weren't interested in that. They have their preformed opinions. And that is the world. That is not a criticism about them. But how can we develop mechanism, especially in an augmented environment, whereby Okay, this is a really key other point. Please all pay fully attention because it's not going to stay in my head for long. Remember the thing that it turns out that brain's nerve cells may only be able to make connections if they're already there. It's still not entirely proven, but it's a strong hypothesis that, let's say you learn something new. You don't grow a dendrite going like that. There has to be a dendrite between these two different pathways that then gets strengthened. If there was none, it cannot exist, right? So how can we help these tiny dots, because we all have them in different areas? What mechanisms can we build? Like what we saw just now with Andrea is really provocative. And the computational stuff that Fabienne is doing is really provocative. How can we help these dots of knowledge to cross that huge chasm?
Well, that's why I stuck my head up, because one of the things that struck me as Fabienne was just showing those sort of tests he'd done with the desktop LLM I thought this is sort of useful, because one of the things I find when I'm teaching people using sort of tools for thought is to tell them, if it looks pretty, you're doing it wrong. You've got to the point where you're no longer thinking about the subject. You're playing with the info. So you're not communicating with anyone but yourself. I'm not talking about graphic design. I'm actually talking about here where you're just trying to understand things. So over attention to whether they line up or that they're exactly the same size or something is missing the point, when what you're trying to understand is iteration. So the ability to quickly, for instance, if you thinking about whales, to make something that's basically whale-like, so that it's not jarring with your cognitive process, I think it's really useful. And it's also useful that you can do something quickly without going off to the whale store and spending half an hour deciding which whale you want to buy to put in your model, which you've now forgotten what you were trying to do with. So being able to pull sort of shapes that are sufficient to aid your cognitive process but not derail you, I think is really, really interesting and a really nice thing to see.
Yeah.